I'm a native New Yorker. Damn it, it ain't that budge in the region. I mean, the only team that's worth ever talking about, and that's periodically and minimally, is Boston College. I mean, from that, you can go all the way throughout the East Coast until you get down south. There's no football that's worth talking about. Why is that? I mean, as somebody that's renowned for covering college football, why has it? I don't know whether it's Rutgers, and obviously that's the only thing that we could think of right now, because it's not like Villanova or anybody or St. John's or anybody else has something like that. They don't even have a program in St. John's. But I'm just saying, when you look at the East Coast, how come college football, has never resonated?
Well, I think for the biggest reasons, there's so many other things going on. Listen, I spent a lot of my time, I grew up in Tennessee. I spent most of my life in Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing else. Mm-hmm. You don't have pennant races.
Right.
You don't have the NFL.
Right.
You don't have the NBA to think about.
Mm-hmm.
You have college football. And it's a year. I mean, I don't want to say this too loudly, but I've made a pretty fair living. I'm not Stephen A. Smith.
Stop it.
But college football we talk about it all the time. Mm-hmm. It's passionate, and I think it's a better game than the NFL. The NFL has so many issues that you've already talked about that college football doesn't. But my family's all from New York. They didn't grow up talking about college football. My father was a Yankees fan. Mm-hmm. He followed the New York Giants. When they moved to Tennessee, and I had me. I didn't know much about it either, because that wasn't natural. And I think if you're, if you look, what are the biggest college football markets in the country? Birmingham's number one. Columbus, Ohio is number two. I mean, and you're talking about the Alabama-Auburn game, Stephen, a couple of years ago, did something like a 68 share in Birmingham.
Wow.
My question was, what are the other people watching?
What were they thinking about? What were they doing?
What are 32% of the public? But my point is, in New York, there's no reason to pay attention to college football. The media doesn't. I mean, you pick up the New York papers. Back when papers were picked up, you weren't. You had maybe the small article, the talk shows, this show in New York. I mean, I realize we're talking about right now, but day in, day out, it's what's going on with the Yankees. Can the Jets and Darnold get? I mean, so that's the difference between what's going on up in New York versus Atlanta, Birmingham, Memphis, Nashville, places like that.
Let's switch subjects, Paul Finebaum, to this notion. My man Herm Edwards, my former colleague, is now the coach at Arizona State. Kevin Sumlin's at Arizona. Watched him lose this game this past weekend. I think it was the BYU. It was the BYU. It was the BYU. Okay. I watched that. I watched the fourth quarter of that over the weekend. Then we're looking at Jimbo Fisher. He's now at Texas A&M. We see it wasn't a good look for Taggart to look the way they looked at Florida State. It just wasn't a good look. You saw a considerable drop-off from what you once saw for Jimbo Fisher at Florida State and what we saw this past weekend with Florida State. When you think about the coaching changes that have taken place in college football this year, what are you most excited about?
Well, I think the Jimbo Fisher move was probably the most impactful because, forget the money. And by the way, I had somebody out. I was out in College Station Thursday night. Somebody out there told me, he said, Jimbo got 75. If he had held out for 100, he'd have gotten that. Oil prices are up. They don't care out there.
That's okay.
It's just win.
That's right.
You have to have everybody all in. Florida State, I won't write them off. I mean, Jimbo just checked out last year. That program has slipped a little bit in recruiting. Miami's hurt them a little bit. You have Georgia. You have the University of Florida now. Mullen, I think, is also going to be impactful. Probably my favorite coaching hire of all was Scott Frost. I have been around him a couple of times, Stephen A., and he's as close to the perfect coach as I have run into in a long time. That's a tough place to change the dynamics. This isn't Tom Osborne. This isn't 1991.
You talk about that in Nebraska. You talking about this? And what are you expecting from him?
But I think he will improve the product a lot. And you don't need to be that good on that side of the Big Ten. Look at Wisconsin. You can be good, but you don't have to be as good as Ohio State.
How good is Wisconsin going to be this year? I've got them. I'm giving them a chance. Why? Because they play a power game, and you got Jonathan Taylor running the football, and you got that offensive line that he's running behind. I think they can make games ugly. I think they'll play in inclement weather. They won't get teams that are capable of being at their best because of that inclement weather, and I think ultimately it could help them. Am I off my rocker by saying that?
No, and I think they go to Penn State, and as I say that, I wouldn't write Penn State off yet either. I mean, there's a lot of overreaction to that game, but I do think James Franklin is a superb football coach. So I don't buy them as much as you do, although you made a compelling argument there. I didn't buy them last year, even limping into – I say limping because they didn't play anybody.
Right.
And, they'll play a little better schedule because they go to Penn State, but I would not put them in my Final Four.
Paul Finebaum right here with Stephen A. on ESPN Radio and simulcast on ESPN News as well. Before I let you get on out of here, I got a few things because I want to transition to the NFL because, damn it, these players is going to be in the NFL. You covered them when they were in college. You know about them just as well as anybody else, if not better. Saquon Barkley for the New York Giants. What's he going to do for them?
I love him. I mean, he's as good as I've seen in college in a long time, and yeah, again, the Giants have a lot to overcome, but I think he'll be very impactful.
You think he will?
I will.
Okay. Baker Mayfield.
I'm not buying.
Explain. We need this explanation because Cleveland, and listen, he's going to be a reserve. He's coming off the bench. He's going to back up Tyrod Taylor. I think it's a smart move by Cleveland to make that move. However, Baker Mayfield supposedly has the it factor and all of this other stuff. Your thoughts?
I'm in the minority here, but I just something about psychological makeup. I've seen him do too many stupid things, and you try that in the NFL, and you're going to get blown away.